Everything around sexual abuse or sexual addiction it's very difficult for a child to know what's real when they've been abused. Okay, is it my fault? You know, did they, you know, am I being loved? Is this love? Do they, you know, is this parent understanding what they're doing? Since I liked what I felt, does that make me, you know, bad and wrong because I enjoyed or I felt a sensation? So the sensation equaling the behavior, it makes it very confusing for a child or an adult who is retrospectively looking at their abuse to understand what's real. So we do a lot of examination of what's real. You know, getting an idea of where's your center, where's the ground around all this. Very important. So good boundaries help prevent abuse, and that's that. A couple other facts. I don't know if we want to, how much time do we have?
Probably another 20 minutes.
Only 20 minutes? Okay.
Sure.
All right. So, well, I just want to stop there. Any questions or anything? Because I feel like that's a good place to sort of open it up if anyone wanted to, I don't know, anything come up for anybody? It's kind of heavy stuff.
I think the company is Mind Geek. I just Googled it.
Oh,
No porn
right on.
on my phone.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mind Geek, just if anyone wants to look.
Mind deep?
Mind Geek.
I'm sorry, what is it?
Just
Mind?
saw a porn on.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Pornhub. Yeah. Yeah, they're gobbling up, they're monopolizing it. Because what they're doing is they're channeling it. What they're doing is, you know how computers, they're tracking where your eyes go on the screen and what you're looking at. And I mean, it's amazing what these engines are following you, and they're seeing what you're interested in and what arouses you. And then what they do is they put these subtle ads and links.
You know what's really,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff on Facebook and Twitter from Mind
Yes.
Geek that's completely benign. Like, it's interesting, I think they're, you know, it's just like clickbait, literally. Like,
Yeah, and it
Oh,
takes you
yeah.
down this rabbit hole and it takes you into this world, and they get you hooked, and that's what they're doing. And it's dark, it's evil. I mean, in a lot of ways. That the fact that, I mean, they're really just about trying to get you, a child hooked on these images, and it's all about, you know, the money, I suppose. I don't see where's the value otherwise, right? Pretty scary stuff. So, I was just at a CATSO meeting. So CATSO is Connecticut Association for Treatment of Sex Offenders. Okay, and I'm probably the newest provider to that community. I just joined in December after sitting with Dr. Segroy. And what I learned was, although the epidemic with sex, as a matter of fact, the pornography has lessened sex offense. Actually, it has taken the edge away. It's the pornography for someone who is a sex offender or prone to be a sex offender. The pornography can take the edge away from them actually acting out an offense, is from what I'm understanding. So, if there's any good from it, I don't think it's lessened. It certainly hasn't gotten worse, though, from what I understand, from what I was told last Friday when I was with the CATSO community. So, offending, because it's sort of their appetite is being met, you know, as far as their sexual charges or their need to, to exploit some sort of sexuality. The images tend to take an edge enough where they don't take the risk, and there's less risk. You know, you don't have to leave your own home to get some sort of pleasure or some sort of connection for yourself. So why is community supervision important for juvenile sex offenders? And I don't know, maybe this is getting into your area, Lisa, so. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say community supervision can help ensure that youth behave appropriately in the community and participate in treatment. Supervision also allows trained officers or case managers to provide support, to work closely with parents, school personnel, and others who are responsible for juvenile offenders. And what other strategies are being used to manage juvenile sex offenders? many states have laws regarding this. What I'll do is I'll get into the treatment part of it. So one thing is important as a therapist, sensitivity and awareness is, and I think why I've been drawn to this population is because I do my own work. I've been in therapy for 16 years. I'll never not be in therapy. I feel like it's my strongest professional asset is my own process, is examining my own process, is understanding what I'm dissociated from and my own shadow and darkness and things that I had to defend against as a child. And I think it's important for me, not only as a professional, to get consultation and supervision around what I'm absorbing with my clients and what's getting triggered and touched inside me, but it's also important for me to examine, my relationship with my child inside me. And I call them blind spots. We all have them. We all have blind spots. And, the smaller we can make our blind spots, the more we're able to take responsibility for how we're acting out those dissociations. So, and what I learned is, through Dr. Susan Segroy, it's important when you sit across from treating an offender or an abused, an offendee, then it's important to know what it's like to feel what it's like to be a victim. Okay, it's important to be able to understand that, to have empathy for yourself and how you could be a victim of violence or seduction or exploitation or manipulation. And then even more importantly, it's important to know how you could be the offender. It's important to know about the violent part inside you and your ability as a human being to be exploitive or to be manipulative and to be violent. Yes?
I don't know if I'm on topic with my question or not. So like with the relationships with children, if a parent was to turn to that child for emotional or physical comfort or to be somewhat inappropriate with them to the extent of making them aware of their body image when they're really young children, that kind of thing.
Sure.
I have a case that's kind of maybe like that, and I didn't realize that until I read that, where the children are doing certain behaviors. One's masturbating.
Yeah.
One is putting their fingers in their nose until it bleeds and rubbing their feet on the carpet. I mean, is the father's behaviors, that can cause those behaviors?
Yeah, well, it's a way to self-soothe.
Right.
It's a self-soothing. So compulsive masturbation as a child is a way to simply, they're just self-soothing themselves and they don't have the skills or the validation or they haven't been affirmed around how to be with that. So they go into hiding and they do these things.
So I mean, does that turn into a termination of parental rights, or can that be?
I'm not sure about that. It's a great question. I think it certainly needs to be examined, right? DCF get involved?
DCF's involved.
Yeah,
Children are in
right.
foster care.
Yeah.
The children's therapist, after the children see the father, even though the visit goes very well, and they're finding the father appropriate now,
Right.
the therapist says cut off all visitation, and they're saying terminate the rights.
Interesting, yeah. And without knowing really what's been done, right?
Well, I mean, the children have said other things, that daddy cut off mommy's fingers, but mommy has 10 fingers. Brother hit me with a baseball bat, but they know that that's not true. They said, Daddy, my brother took pictures of us, and then the kids were questioned, well, what did Daddy say when he saw the pictures? So, I mean, the whole case is...
Yeah, I don't know. Lisa might be able to talk about that.
It sounds like part of it is that they could have witnessed severe domestic violence, and
They
that
did.
can also lead to sexual acting out. So I think you really have to look at the whole picture, and I think before DCF actually terminates parental rights, they really do everything they can to work with the family to see, first of all, identify what's going on, have the children interviewed if necessary, talk with clinicians, see if the parents participate in all the programs that they're supposed to participate in. But it's not, I think I'd have to know like the whole picture,
Sure, we
but
could talk after the...
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very difficult to know what's real there, isn't it? And so it goes back to my point about it's really about what's real. Let's get down, let's really keep examining. And it's difficult a child's brain does not work like an adult's brain, right? It just doesn't think, it's not developed enough to be able to connect the dots. So, making up things or imagining things is a way for them to kind of compartmentalize or to deal with what they noted, what they're feeling inside or what they witnessed. It's very difficult to make sense of it. So I think Lisa would be able to, this is somewhat of I think I'm going to be coming down. I'm going to be seeing more and more of that.
You're right.
And so, it takes a tremendous amount of skill and comprehensive assessment to really get a firm understanding on what's happening here, right? Well, thanks for bringing
that
that up.
one sentence that you had in here kind of caught my attention.
Which one was it?
The one where it said where the parents take their emotional, work through their emotional stuff with their children.
Right. Yeah, the surrogate stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where you really have like John Bradshaw has a good book, Championing the Inner Child. I don't know if anyone knows about that book. It's really good. It's basically shows an image of two adults acting like children. So you're being parented by children. So because they're emotionally stunted or emotionally their intelligence is not. As a matter of fact, what I found in offending and addiction is when you're sexually abused, you become very emotionally stunted. You're afraid of emotion. So you dissociate from developing your emotion. And what happens is when you become an adult and you're not emotionally developed, you could be a 35, 40-year-old man with an emotional intelligence of a 12-year-old because of what happened when you were in your youth. And it doesn't really show you can be really resilient with lack of emotional intelligence through your 20s and into your mid-30s. You can really get through without it because we're so resilient when we're young and we're such an intellect type of society. It's what you know, it's what you can, everything's based on more concrete ways of being. And also the culture doesn't really support men being emotional. It's sort of labeled as a weakness, or being vulnerable is a problem, or it means you're less. The truth is it's the exact opposite. Men need to be able to develop these places inside them so they're more well-rounded, they're more whole. But they're not. I mean, it'd be amazing. I sit with men in their 60s and their 70s, and they are just so disconnected from what they're feeling. And it's sad. It's sad to see them so alienated, because what happens is, like I said earlier, 20s and 30s, you can be very resilient and but when you get in your 40s and 50s, you naturally become vulnerable because you're aging and you're just breaking down naturally. So what happens is the cracks become larger and you can't armor yourself as well as you could when you were younger, and now you start to feel inferior. And what that leads to is, because you don't have the emotions to fall back on to help you cope with aging and with, going through each development stage, then it leads to depression, anxiety, isolation, and illness, physical, and you start to break down, and you start to, and so you start to insulate, and what happens is, you're like, if you really knew me, you wouldn't love me, kind of thing, or I don't know how to be with you, and from an emotional standpoint. And what it's done is it's creating an existential crisis for many people as they come in, I guess a midlife crisis. So a midlife crisis doesn't have to do with just like, did my life pass me by? It's how I'm not able to express myself in an authentic, real, powerful way, because I don't have the tools, I don't have the development. So, yeah. Any other questions about that, or? So, just to finish up with the treatment part of it. So, the sensitivity and awareness of the therapist is important. asking, mental health professional, advocates, or volunteers, it is essential that we ask questions about victimization as a standard procedure for every intake. Some ways of asking these questions follow. What kind of punishment did your parent or guardians use on you as a child? Were there any relatives with whom you felt a particular discomfort? Did anyone ever touch you in a way that felt uncomfortable or frightening? And did you ever have sex with someone when you were not sure that you wanted to, or knew for sure that you did not want to? These are very important things to ask during an intake, and adults and children as well. Culture's changing. I mean, you see it all the time. I see jokes about, anyone see the Facebook post with the 18-year-olds went to war back in the 60s, and now, just being tough and of service and taking it on the chin, and now our kids are, there's a picture of a baby crying or something. These are our kids now or whatever, feeling entitled. And so there's this big culture. The old school regimen would be, oh, you're soft on these kids, or, how are they going to learn how to survive in the world if you're not hard on them or whatnot, and that whole, tough love. That never really worked, actually. I think a lot of people might disagree with me, but it all it does is really perpetuate the pattern and the cycle of abuse. So if a parent thinks spanking or using violence is a way to deter behavior or to right or wrong, I don't see. There was actually just an article I posted on my Facebook professional page around how there's been research that hitting a child does not help them become more responsible children or adults for that matter. So, but what's going to happen is if a child's hit, they're going to say, oh, this is what I deserve, this is what I needed. But if they're punished that way, so what happens though is children will hide from their behavior, or they'll become organized so that, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, I'm not going to show you a side of me that you're going to disapprove. I'm not going to give you a chance. But that's not real, is it? That's not authentic. So what that does is that compromises the safety. So if I'm presenting myself in so sex addicts are very, very brilliant, sophisticated minds. They're successful. I mean, in my men's group alone, I have a lawyer, a physical, a professor, high up law enforcement, someone who's in politics. I mean, they're very driven, successful, complicated, sophisticated minds. And what I mean is they're very good at reading their environment. They're very, very hyper vigilant, and they're scanning the room, and they're just they're sizing up everyone in the room, and they're so good at manipulating and seducing is that they're so likable, and they really draw you in, and you feel very trusting with them, and you're almost like there's like this magnetic attraction to them. And it's all because they're so hypervigilant around you not seeing the parts of them, and them using their manipulation, not because they're necessarily wanting to hurt you, is because they're afraid that they won't get their needs met, or you won't approve of them, or you won't like them. So they got all these old young patterns running. But the scary thing about that is it's not honest. It's not real. And that compromises safety. That's a problem. So if someone's BSing you all the time, and you have no other way of detecting that they're doing that, you have to take them at face value, right? And that puts you in a position to be exploited or to be abused or manipulated. And so what happens is they come in after a while when they come into treatment. So typically they get caught, and that's what brings them to treatment. They don't typically bring themselves. But they'll come in, and what drives it is they're so ashamed of how they have to be that way in the world, because they're so scared that they can't be loved for who they are, because they weren't loved for who they were. There was condition to their love. They had to act a certain way. They had to behave. They had to always present themselves in an acceptable way, or they were going to be punished, or it was going to be used against them. So I think it's very important that that really snowballs into someone an illness of offending or addiction when it comes to sexual compulsivity. So, one last thing I'll share that I thought was interesting was this article that a client of mine gave. It says, at age 5, kids may have self-image figured out. Research looks into children how they view themselves. So before this article was written, before this research was done, they thought that self-esteem was established way in a later stage of development. But it says, I'll just read it to you. It says, children develop self-esteem by age 5, much earlier than previously thought, according to new research that suggests children gain either a positive or negative view of themselves before they begin formal schooling. The researchers found that self-esteem at age 5 is as strong as those measured in adults. We were surprised to find how strong it was, said Dario Sebenek, a research scientist at the University of Washington Institute for Learning in Brain Sciences and co-author of the study. The first 5 years seem to be a foundation on which children build for the rest of their lives. So that's significant right there. Still, self-esteem can change either positively or negatively as children grow. At age 5, it's developed and already pretty strong, but any traumatic experience can affect you. The findings published in the January 2016 issue of the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology come from a new test designed to measure self-esteem in 5-year-olds, the youngest age group to be measured. Previous tests of self-esteem required children to be able to read and to be able to understand what is meant by being a good or bad person. Preschoolers can answer questions about narrow, concrete skills, such as, I am good at running, or I am good at letters. But they have difficulty providing reliable answers or understanding what it means if you ask, are you a good person? That understanding usually comes around 8 years of age. So researchers gave the 5-year-old several flags and played a game in which they were told some of the flags were me and some not me, and asked them to respond with the flags to a series of positive and negative words broadcast over a loudspeaker. The children had to combine words and press buttons on a computer to signal whether they associated the good or bad words with me flags or not. More than 230 children from the Seattle area participated in the study, which found that 90% of them had a positive self-esteem, while just 10% expressed a negative self-esteem. Researchers also measured gender identity and found that children with high self-esteem strongly identify with and preferred their own gender. Although both boys and girls preferred their own gender, the effect was stronger in girls. In other words, girls with high self-esteem tend to prefer to associate with other girls and to think that girls are better than boys. It's still true, isn't it?
Yes.
The researchers plan to follow the children in the study to examine whether self-esteem measured in preschool can predict outcomes later in childhood, such as academic achievement and whether self-esteem changes with experience. So that's pretty significant. That if a traumatic event happens at a very young age, how much it can really impact your path of development and your ability to have a healthy esteem, and to question, if you were sexually abused by a